Stress is something we all deal with, isn't it? From the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed, there always seems to be something demanding our attention. Deadlines at work, responsibilities at home, relationships to nurture, it all adds up. But have you ever stopped to think about what stress actually is? What's its source, and is there a way to manage it that doesn't involve simply pushing through or burning out? Recently, I came across a talk by Kadam Morten Clausen, a Buddhist teacher, who shared some insightful perspectives on stress. His approach really struck a chord with me because it was so practical, yet deeply transformative. Clausen begins by pointing out something we all know but rarely reflect on. Stress is everywhere. It's a constant presence in our lives. From children worrying about their grades to grandparents navigating health issues, stress spans all ages and walks of life. We talk about it all the time, but how often do we really pause to understand it? The first point Clausen makes is that we tend to blame external factors for our stress. Think about it. How often do you hear or even say, "Work is so stressful right now," or "My family is driving me crazy"? It's almost second nature to pin the blame on things outside of ourselves. Clausen challenges this idea. He suggests that stress isn't actually about the situation we're in, but rather about how we respond to it. To illustrate this, he shares a scenario most of us can relate to: missing a subway train. Picture it. The train doors close right in front of you, and you're stuck on the platform, waiting for the next one. Now, pay attention to how different people react in this same situation. Some might get visibly upset, pacing, sighing loudly, or even muttering under their breath. Others might take it in stride, calmly pulling out a book or checking their phone. The situation is the same for everyone, but the responses vary widely. Why is that? Clausen explains that this difference in reaction highlights an essential truth. Stress isn't inherent in the situation itself. It's rooted in our minds and how we interpret what's happening. If you think about it, this makes perfect sense. Missing the train doesn't change your circumstances drastically. It's your reaction, your resistance to what's happening, that creates stress. He goes on to define stress as the tension that arises between what we want to happen and what's actually happening. This gap between expectation and reality is where stress lives. Take, for example, a boss who keeps piling on work. Outwardly, you might say, "Sure, I'll get it done," but inside, you're likely stewing in frustration or anger. This internal resistance, the mental pushback against the situation, fuels the cycle of stress. Now, here's the part that really made me sit up and take notice. Clausen says that the key to managing stress is not to fight it but to recognize and accept it. That might sound counterintuitive at first. After all, we're often told to push through stress, distract ourselves, or even ignore it. But Clausen's approach is about creating space between ourselves and our reactions. He suggests that when we acknowledge our feelings, whether it's anger, frustration, or disappointment, we give ourselves a moment to pause. In that pause, we can choose a more skillful response. Let's go back to the example of the boss. Instead of immediately reacting with resentment or snapping under pressure, what if you took a moment to breathe and recognize how you're feeling? By doing this, you're not suppressing your emotions but acknowledging them. This simple act of recognition creates a mental buffer. From there, you can decide how to respond in a way that's more constructive and less draining. Maybe it means calmly setting boundaries or viewing the situation as a chance to practice patience. Clausen also talks about the importance of acceptance. This doesn't mean resigning yourself to being a doormat or passively enduring everything life throws at you. Instead, it's about letting go of the resistance to what's already happening. When we accept the reality of a situation, we free ourselves from the mental struggle against it. This doesn't just reduce stress, it also opens the door to seeing challenges as opportunities for growth. Imagine looking at a tough situation and thinking, "How can this help me grow?" Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" So, what can we take away from all this? The next time you feel stress creeping in, try this. Pause and take a deep breath. Acknowledge what you're feeling without judgment. Is it frustration? anger, anxiety, name it. Then remind yourself that this moment, no matter how challenging, doesn't have to control you. You have the power to choose your response. And in that choice lies your freedom. Stress is a part of life, but it doesn't have to run the show. By shifting our perspective and practicing mindfulness, we can transform how we experience and manage stress. Kadam Morten Clausen's insights remind us that while we can't always change our circumstances, we can always change how we respond to them. And that, perhaps, is the most empowering lesson of all.